This is the Troutbitten Podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout.
This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten Podcast, episode 11. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com, where you can find almost everything that we talk about in these podcasts in great detail. With 750 articles and counting, the Troutbitten website is full of stories, commentary, and technical articles that dig deep into the how-tos of fly fishing for trout. So, we fish for the experience. We fish for the challenges and for the chance to improve our skills. We fish for the way the activity of fishing brings us together with family and friends. And we fish for the places that the chase of wild trout takes us. But none of us spends enough time on the water. For the trout-bitten type of angler, the draw to the river is ever present. And we plan for the next trip as the previous one winds down. So we fish when we can. Instead of waiting for the best conditions, the diehard angler fishes because it's Sunday, or because it's Tuesday evening after work, or because it's Monday morning after dropping the kids off at school. Few of us have the luxury to pick and choose our times on the water. So every angler who wishes to fish quickly learns to deal with tough conditions. And that is today's topic. We're here to talk about fighting the elements, dealing with the weather. How can we effectively fish through rain, wind, cold weather, ice, snow, hard sun, and anything else that nature throws at us? There's always some natural element that we're battling out there. Usually it's more than one. And if we don't have a plan for dealing with these elements, we fail. Some anglers walk away when the going gets tough. But as we all know, sometimes the best fishing happens in those toughest conditions. So we fish hard, we persevere, we adapt and meet the challenges before us. And quite often, some of our most memorable days happen in these harsh or difficult conditions. So my friends are joining me today to share some tips, some ideas about how to get through the elements and get to the end of the day, not just with trout in the net, but with some lasting memories and a sense of satisfaction. But before we get to our main discussion, let me introduce my friends with our Q&A round. Here is my friend Austin Dando. Hi, buddy.
Hey, how we doing?
Good. Austin, what are the most basic tools you need to get into fly tying? The basic tools, the most basic tools.
Sure. So to get into fly tying, you really don't need a whole lot. Like I don't have a whole lot now.
Right.
All you need is a half-decent vise. It doesn't have to be top of the line.
Yep.
All it needs to do is hold your hook in place.
Sure.
So get a decent vise, get a sharp pair of scissors. You can start with one bobbin. That's what holds your thread.
Yep.
You can get a whip finisher, though it's not necessary, but I found it easy when I was first learning to use a whip finisher rather than trying to do it with my fingers.
Yeah.
Those couple things are really the basis of what you need. From there, you can decide what your fly tying style is, and based on that, you may get more specialty tools, but that's a good baseline.
I'm with you. That's what I was thinking too. Vise, bobbin, scissors. So honestly, I tied probably 5 years without whip finishing anything ever. I'd throw like 5 half hitches and that was good.
There you go.
You know?
Yep.
And when
I started out tying eggs for steelhead because they were easy. Just put some yarn on a hook.
Well, so let me ask anybody this. Do you guys recommend a fly tying kit or no kit and just get the materials or whatever that you need?
I think a kit bottlenecks you, meaning like it's going to force you to tie what's in the kit, buy the vise, buy the bobbin. I think most times you can get that under $20 now if you look around.
Yeah, just about. Definitely under 50.
Yeah, and then just start with something simple, like midge flies that are just thread on a hook and you're good to go.
Yep.
Except that those are tiny. that's hard to tie tiny.
Time in 14.
Okay.
14 midges
Size
work.
14 midges. That's Bill's
Pseudo
recommendation.
pheasant's a perfect beginner fly.
A pseudo pheasant, Austin's favorite pheasant tail. Nah, I'm not a kit guy either. I never recommend kits to people. I say buy what you need for that first fly, whether it's a woolly bugger or a waltz worm. Yeah, the kits, that's a good way to put it, Bill, is they sort of bottleneck you.
Yeah, the rest will come in time.
So let me introduce Bill Dell. Bill, William,
Dominique.
Hey, yes or no? Does rod balance matter? Just give me a yes or no. He's saying no.
Yes. I'll say
All right.
yes.
Okay. Why does it matter then? And where should that balance point be? Really, tell me that. Where should the balance point be?
So to me, if you hold the rod, I guess the official way is hold your rod.
There's an official
your
way.
Pointer finger.
There's an official way.
It's the official. This is the official way I do it. I hold my pointer finger.
The official way I do it.
Hold my pointer finger at the end of the cork. That's my official way. And see if the rod kind of balances one way or the other. So I looked into this last year a little bit because I had some problems with my elbow and had tendonitis in it. And I had fished for a decade without caring about rod balance. I went back and was like, well, let me balance my rods so that I feel like they're better balanced and they're not, completely out of whack one way or another. And I do feel like it helps a little bit with the swing weight and the balance. Is it a lot? I don't know, but I don't have as much tendonitis this year. Yeah. And I fish just as much, so maybe it does.
So I like my balance point right there at what I call the trigger finger. And your official way is for your pointer finger to be pointed forward and on top. And actually, that's the way I do it too. That's the way a lot of people do it. But lots of people put the thumb on top. Maybe more people that I see put the thumb on top. Either way works. But if the thumb on top, then my trigger finger becomes my pointer finger. By trigger finger, I mean where the line goes through. And for me, I want that balance point right there. And when I have it right there, I feel like I'm more accurate. I really do. I feel like the rod becomes, almost effortless to hold. And then I'm not squeezing it just to hold it while I'm casting it. I'm only squeezing it sort of at the very end of that forward cast. And that gives me a little bit of extra power, especially when I'm thinking about a tuck cast or I'm trying to really stop it hard and do different things even with a dry fly. That's where I like the balance point. Anybody else?
I personally don't think it matters very much. I just don't think I've ever noticed it in any way.
You probably have really balanced rods, though. I bet you do. Rods and reels.
Maybe so.
You might just locked into it. Honestly, it's not that hard to get. These days, most even long rods are light enough. You get the right size reel, it's pretty close.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is every rod now is pretty light for what we're doing. If you're fishing a rod that fits the style of fishing that we're doing, and almost every reel is heavy enough to balance out a long rod. If it's not like a little 3-weight reel or something like that.
I had a 9'6" weight for a streamer rod one time, and it was heavy. It was kind of a cheaper rod, and it was heavy. And I was kind of obsessed with balancing all my rods and reels at the time. I took the reel, which was the right size, but it was light because it was designed to be light. And anyway, I put lead core trolling line on there and did other things. I put golfer's tape.
Tape.
Right? There's all kind of ways, right? So you guys have done this too then. And
the other thing...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing we have to remember is that when you balance those rods, if you fish a fly line, you better put the fly line out the guide so you know what it's actually doing. But we're often not doing that. So most of the weight starts and ends in the reel for us, which automatically helps kind of balance the rod towards us if we have a heavy rod tip or something like that.
Right, because you're saying we're not doing that.
Because we're often fishing mono, which is, when you have that out the guides, it's much less less weight.
Sure is. So, how are you going to be fishing? And that's how you should balance it, for sure.
And just something as simple as gripping the rod in the same place every time. I know we talked about that there to begin with, but I think I even noticed myself, like there are times where I notice casting seeming more, I don't know, I just can feel the difference in balance. And sure enough, oftentimes I've inched my hand up till my pointer finger's actually like up the rod. Yeah. And my hand's barely on the cork anymore. I don't know why. I just tend to ride up over time if I'm not paying attention to it.
And holding it the same way would make you more accurate. Even if only slightly. It matters, yeah.
Do you guys all cast with your pointer finger on the back side of the rod when you're casting, or do you cast without your pointer finger?
So cast with your finger on the spine of the rod.
I like that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or cast with your thumb on the top, or on the spine of the rod.
My finger's on the spine of the rod.
Same.
I'm a thumb guy.
Yep.
I'm a thumb guy too.
Squeeze.
I'm a neither. I got my hand wrapped around.
Right. Are you serious?
And the squeeze.
That's
I hate seeing that.
Yeah, I'm the squeeze. It's the squeeze.
Oh man, I really do. I hate seeing that.
I hate the pointer finger. I'm like,
but you don't have the thumb up there either.
Yeah. No, it's just It's all, the rod's like
that's
resting.
No
interesting.
wonder you don't catch many fish.
I'm more accurate than you, so
Oh.
No, when I guide and I see people doing that, I really try to get them to either put the finger or the thumb up top. I feel like it makes a difference.
Hmm.
Let me introduce my friend, Dr. Trevor Smith. Hey, Trevor.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. Why are so many fly anglers also guitar players?
Hey, that's a good question. I think it goes beyond just guitar playing in my mind. I think there are crossover skills in fishing. And I think having been an athlete or being a musician, and guitar in particular, has some value when it comes to learning how to fly fish. And I think the delicacy of handling line through a trigger finger and casting certainly can be traced back to better muscle memory or better proprioception and just feeling in your fingertips. And so proprioception is just the awareness of where your fingers are in space or where anything is in space in your body. You see like basketball players wear a sleeve on their arm. That's to give them better proprioception over their arm, better awareness of where it is in space, theoretically leading to better accuracy on shot.
Sounds like we need to be wearing sleeves for fly fishing.
That's next. First, there was the buff. Here comes the sleeve.
First the buff. There it goes.
Dumb wore the sweatband.
Oh, yeah.
The sweatband.
Oh,
Always know where your head is. But a good guitar player, who's using their fingers a lot for guitar playing, I think is going to be a better handler of their line, probably have better dexterity. But I also think there's a rhythm component to it. We've talked maybe about that as well. But in music, early on in music theory, you learn how to keep rhythm or keep time. And there's such a cadence to the cast in fly fishing, whether that's always acknowledged or not. And so I think that helps a lot as well.
That's neat.
So I think probably you could continue to trace other benefits across.
I thought they were just all hippies.
Yeah, exactly.
they don't have jobs. They have more time to spend.
That's right.
How do you feel about that,
That's
Dom?
right.
Musicians,
They don't have jobs.
That's right. They don't have
Musicians
jobs. They just, they just play with their guitar.
I think they just have a passion for beautiful things that take a lot of work to
Listen
get good
to
at.
this. I love it. See that? So 4 of us play guitar, and then Bill doesn't.
I have no musical skills, whatever, but I can outfish any of you.
Even
Yeah, how do we explain your talent, Bill?
I don't know. Freak of nature.
Freak of
finger
nature.
on top, Bill. Practice it. Here's my friend Josh Darling. Hey, Josh, do you most enjoy fishing alone or with a friend?
Depends on what friend.
Yes, it does.
Very honest.
I love them both. In general, more of my time on the water is spent alone, and I love it that way. But I really do enjoy sharing the water with good friends. It's not one over the other, really. It's just usually I'm alone, and I love that.
So if you're with one of your good friends that you enjoy fishing with, what's your favorite way to do it? Let's say you're on a stream that's 50 feet wide, and it's kind of woodsy, because that matters. Sometimes you can fish right beside people. Yeah, in that situation, what's your favorite way to do it with a friend?
Usually we'll hike first, so get to hard to access water, and then split up a ways. And then, we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, how Trevor and I, when we started night fishing, we began carrying radios. And that's a fun way of doing it, honestly, because you get to check in every once in a while. Neat. And so you don't have to see each other and be like, hey, what's working? How are you doing?
Yeah.
Split up a ways so that you're not, getting in each other's face. And if it feels necessary, leapfrog every once in a while if it feels like one person's consistently getting the good stuff.
Like when you're fishing with Bill, front ends all the time.
Yeah, I always get the good stuff.
Bill points out the good stuff, but if you're not quick enough to jump on it,
I'm like, hey, that's a good spot.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a good spot. After the third time, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take the good spot.
Austin, you seem like one of those guys who would enjoy just standing there watching your friend fish and taking turns. We've never done that together, but do you do that?
That is fun.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm fishing with somebody else, I can get kind of sidetracked or distracted in a good way.
Yeah, I know.
And just watch my friend fish and sit on the bank a while and get up and walk away.
It's a beautiful thing.
And then they'll come and sit by me, and it's real nice.
Okay, guys, let's take a short break, and we'll come right back talking about how to fight the elements. Whether you're on the water or at the fly tying bench, AvidMax has you covered. AvidMax.com offers an impressive scope of premium brands and products to help you achieve your ultimate goal, success on the water. A catalog of over 19,000 products includes everything a fly angler or fly tyer desires. With fast shipping and expert knowledge, you get the gear you need when you need it. Listeners of the Troutbitten podcast receive a discount when shopping at avidmax.com with the coupon code Troutbitten10, no spaces. Enter the code at checkout to get 10% off your first order. From high mountain streams to the salt flats, AvidMax has the gear and expertise to elevate your game. Fulling Mill is the world's leading producer of flies, fly boxes, hooks, beads, and tippet. Known for their barbless hooks, they have many of your favorite trout patterns tied barbless. Not only that, they feature patterns from anglers like George Daniel, Pat Weiss, Josh Miller, Joe Goodspeed, and many others from around the world. Every pattern is backed by the 200% Fulling Mill guarantee. If a fly isn't up to the highest standards that you expect, they will replace it with two that are. Stock up at fullingmill.com or ask for their flies at your local dealer. All right, guys, let's talk about fishing the elements out there. Dealing with the weather. Let's consider these: rain, wind, cold weather, ice and snow, heat, and then bright sun. Notably, we're not including high water, low water, clear, or muddy water here. Those are also tough conditions to deal with. But this discussion is really for those natural elements that are kind of outside the river itself. We're talking about weather, really. And of course, each of these elements can dramatically affect the fishing, the river, and how we might attempt to successfully catch trout. Once again, here are the elements. Rain, wind, cold weather, and ice and snow kind of go together. Heat, and then bright sun. Let's start with this. What's the hardest element to overcome out there? Any opinions?
Wind.
My least
100%
favorite
wind.
is heat.
No, wind. I think wind is the hardest. Yeah, I'm going out there and saying
Everybody,
wind.
what's wrong with you people?
Wind's the right answer.
Wind. Okay, no.
I agree with wind also.
Sometimes.
Wind gets in my head more than any other elements and it screws my accuracy up. It screws my casts up. It destroys my confidence. I can even put a bobber on and be drifting with a bobber and do all, heavy anchor fly. I can do everything I can possibly think of to counteract the wind. And yet it still plays into my mental confidence about my fishing in such a way that I'd rather pack up.
Trevor, I agree with you. My least favorite is wind too.
Really?
But for a slightly different reason is that it just limits the way that I get to fish that day more than any other condition does for me. Yeah. So often I can overcome adversities in other weather conditions, but wind, the tricks out of the bag is way less in my game.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you and I are probably thinking about wind speeds probably over 15 miles an hour.
Exactly.
So, windy.
Yeah,
I don't care about
for any of these. I think we're thinking about the extremes.
The extremes
of those
For
conditions.
me, 11 and up. That's my number. 11 miles per hour is when it gets dicey.
Guys, I can deal with 14 miles an hour. I just,
I can fish a headbanger at 20 miles
There you
an hour.
go. Well, so this is interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily named wind as the most difficult, but this is cool. I like what you're saying there, Austin. It limits your bag of tricks, right? I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, I agree with that.
And it almost blinds you, I think. You can no longer, at that speed of wind, you can no longer rely upon any vision through the water. You have a poorer view of the depth of the water. The surface of the water is being disturbed so much in these really windy conditions that I just feel like it limits you, and even more than the fishing technique itself.
So what do you do to combat the wind?
Yeah.
What are let's say it's 15 mile an hour. What's your technique?
What you first said there a second ago about throwing a headbanger, I think we all realize one of the best things you can do is overweight the system. I mean, if you're going to decide, okay, I'm not going to fish dries, and we could talk about that in a second, but let's say we're throwing either streamers or nymphs under the water. If you throw more weight in the system, you can beat that wind. I feel like almost any wind, you can beat it with the weight.
I agree. And then usually a suspension technique along with that if I'm going to nymph.
For nymphing.
Our buddy Grob used to talk about when it was really windy, but he still wanted tight line nymph.
Yeah.
And that wind is blowing on his sighter real hard. He'd put like a woolly bugger on the point fly.
Oh, yeah.
And then let that wind dance his woolly bugger around on the bottom, add some animation to it.
I know.
Still be in contact enough to detect a striker and eat. And that was one way that he used to do it that I always thought was pretty interesting.
I know. I remember him explaining that to me. I thought he put it on the tag fly.
I don't remember. I mean, don't quote me on that, and if he doesn't do it anymore, but I remember he used to do something along those lines where he took advantage of the wind to put it into his flies.
Yeah. We're talking about Matt Grob, a good friend of ours who now lives out in Montana. We need to get him on here sometime. He'd be a lot of fun, and he has fantastic ideas, and he catches a lot of big trout, and he just fishes all the time.
Fishes with his thumb too.
He definitely fishes with his thumb on top. No, but that idea of using the wind to give your flies animation is pretty unique. I like that.
Right. Yep.
I like that too.
When I have the wind behind me, I feel like I can deal with it better. When I have the wind, a headwind, that's more difficult. That's especially true. We were talking about tight line nymphing a second ago. When I'm in a contact system like that, I feel like the wind behind me, I can kind of pull into the wind. Let's say I'm fishing upstream, I'm trying to get dead drifts, and I can kind of pull my sighter, pull my rod tip and then my sighter into the wind and sort of defeat the effect of the wind. But when it's blowing right at me, now it is creating drag because my sighter becomes a sail, and it's pushing drag right into my system that there's almost no way to defeat it. You can counteract it, like I was saying, with extra weight. And then what Trevor said earlier, you can throw a bobber or some kind of indicator on that tight line rig and have a hell of a good system.
So with wind, I like to keep everything lower, meaning like I'm holding my rod tip as low as I physically possible to the water. So like I'm changing my angle where my angle is a flatter and I'm almost like kind of like dragging the sighter along the surface if I'm trying to tight line. Then that's not like in an extreme condition when you're like, maybe 15 miles an hour and more. But if there's a little bit of a wind, you can usually combat that with a little bit of overweighting, but more with like your rod angle. If you're not holding your rod angle, at shoulder length and you're holding that rod angle basically on the water at that point, you're not letting the wind affect it as much.
I like to fish close too.
You're right on.
The less line you have out of the water,
the
less mass there is to get blown around.
For sure.
Keep that rod or keep that line inside your rod guides, and you don't feel the effects as bad.
Let's sail.
Yeah, and you do have the cover of the wind on the surface too, from the visibility of the trout standpoint.
That's an interesting point.
Broken water.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So we've talked there a lot about nymphing. One of my favorite things to do when it's real windy is throw streamers.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times wind comes with clouds, and if the sun's not directly on top of the fish, I feel like I got a good chance with streamers. Oh, I don't know. Most of the streamer setups that I fish are heavy enough. I can beat that wind. And now I don't care if, my line gets pushed around. That doesn't matter. I'm trying to impart some kind of motion on that streamer anyway.
Right.
That's if it gets windy, that's my first go-to. But there's times I feel like when I get those extreme wind conditions and like an extreme front or something's pushing in, they're not always cooperative with streamer eats where you have to kind of slow it down and get it to them. But that's my first thing to go to. Yeah,
I think, like you said, Austin, your bag of tricks becomes more limited, and yet streamers become so... There's not much that I have to do to change my streamer game, I don't think, for me to try to beat that wind. It doesn't feel like I have to do anything special or like I'm really fighting very much. Like we said, that the adjustments that we need to make in a tight line nymphing game. What about dry flies? You guys fish dries in the wind much?
I've had a couple good days fishing ants in the wind. If I can I usually try to find a little shelter from the wind, but I feel like a lot of times in the fall, the fish are looking up for terrestrials in the wind. And so I've had some good days around here fishing ants in the wind.
Interesting.
Oftentimes, interestingly, I'm thinking about this because of fall, because the best day I ever had doing this, I was with Bill actually, and there were a lot of leaves falling into the water every time it gusted.
Yeah.
And every time it gusted and the leaves fell in the water, you just see rises all around the leaves.
No way.
And I sort of figured...
That's pretty cool.
So I don't know if they were ants or not, but I figured there was something coming off the trees. It was a big sycamore tree that was dropping a lot of leaves. And I figured something insect-wise was coming off those leaves as they hit the water. And so I just started casting ants every time those leaves started to hit the water, and it was a lot of fun.
Neat.
Just started picking off
now,
fish.
Not too long ago, we talked about whether the leaves falling in the river actually will spook the trout. I mean, I had somebody ask me that, or maybe we talked about it, and I said, no, I think they get used to it pretty quickly. And here what you're saying is that is a trigger in that case, that day.
Yeah, they were keying in on it for sure.
That's neat. So when Dad and I went out to Montana a couple times, and Austin, you lived out there, so you can testify to this, that it's windy out there a lot more than...
Yeah.
And you have the big...
Wide open.
Right, big open valleys. And we were there in August both times for a couple weeks at a time. And they would they were eating dries so much. I hardly nymphed. I hardly even threw streamers. It was just fun to just wherever we went, throwing dries. Loved it. And there were some really windy conditions. And I learned pretty quickly that my 5X was kind of just silly to try to fish. I tried going to 4X. Nah. So I went to 3X and sometimes even 2X with 2X with some of the bigger humpies and the hoppers that I was using. But even I fished ants out there in some places. They were like size 12, size 14 ants. But I started fishing those on 3X. Again, you can throw dries in the wind. I just feel like you have to beef up the leader and the tippet.
I think that's a good point. I'll trim back the leader if I throw dries and it's a truly windy day and I need more power. I'm not going to fish a 10-foot, 12-foot leader. I'm going to fish maybe an 8.5 to 9-foot leader to the dry fly, so to speak. And that the fly line, I do think, gives you more mass and acceleration to beat the wind. Where if you're trying to throw a mono rig in the 20 mile an hour winds with a size 14 caddis, you're going to lose that battle. I'd never even
try it. Right? Agreed.
So my kind of least favorite condition is heat. Maybe it's because I'm a larger individual. Have more mass,
more insulation,
and so the heat I would rather fish at 32 degrees instead of 82 degrees.
I'll agree with that. I'd rather fish cold than
but those aren't the extremes,
Fair point.
Fair. I'd rather fish at 92, or sorry, I'd rather fish at 10 degrees than 92.
There you go. That's a much more bold statement.
So let's assume that we're saying we're talking about how the heat affects us and maybe affects our fishing, but not necessarily the fish. Let's assume we're fishing either a tailwater in the heat or we're fishing a spring creek that has enough cold flow. And those fish are fine because let's say it's 64 degrees still. Let's just put that number on it. So we're not talking about heat and how it necessarily even affects the trout's feeding patterns. None of these elements that we're talking about fighting, are we really talking necessarily about how it affects the fish? Yeah, we're going to touch on that. I think what we're talking about is how we can stay comfortable or effective, at least, on the water and stay out there on the water, keep fishing and deal with those conditions and get, good presentations. How does the heat hurt us though? How does the heat hurt presentations?
To me, it just makes me more tired. It dehydrates me quicker. The way I combat it is usually wet weighting.
Yes.
That or I'm dunking my hat, I'm dunking my arms, I'm dunking myself. Yeah. I'm finding a way to stay cool in that 64 degree water. I'm trying to find the deepest run to stand in and cool myself off.
I think that's really what we're saying is it's, so many anglers do stop fishing when it gets uncomfortable out there. And I always used to just go ahead and fish right through the summer. Again, we're on these spring creeks and the water's cold enough. I'd fish right through the summer, but I was uncomfortable and my vest would get very sweaty. And I didn't understand that if I would really wet wade the right way, I could be a lot more comfortable. So when I started wet wading for real, it really changed everything for me. You guys all wet wade?
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by wet wade the right way?
What I used to do was, I believe it or not, I started by wearing jeans.
No.
I know.
Oh boy.
It was dumb. Right? So,
there's the wrong way.
No, I was late teens, early 20s.
Jorts or jeans?
No, jeans. Because, hey, I do a lot of, I've always hiked through the brush. I'm going to the next spot. There's always brush. So I figured, okay, I usually have waders on, but now I don't want to get all cut up and I'm going to wear jeans. Okay, so that's what I wore. Now I wear, I don't know, it's like ripstop nylon pants that dry really, really quickly. You can be out of the water for 8 or 10 minutes and your pants are dry.
Yeah.
And yet they're pretty durable too. I never understood, I don't get wearing the leotard pants or whatever we want to call them. No. I don't get the elf pants. I don't understand that.
So I think the reason you wear the elf pants is to cut water. So if you're in a really fast river, and you have the Columbia pants that are kind of loose fitting around your legs. And so when you get in a really fast current, I know I've seen it in some of the Western guys, and I think those rivers are really fast and really steep gradients. And so that pants kind of flapping in the current may hinder your wading ability as much.
I've actually never seen this. Are you talking about like people wearing tights in the river to wade in?
Yeah, like spandex.
Honestly, Bill, I think you have it. I think you have it right there.
That's
and
weird.
seriously, I think that's a great point.
Who does that? I haven't seen it.
I've seen it a lot, honestly, and
Really?
just pictures. I've seen
Really?
people wet wade around here with that. Bill, do you wear tights? Do you wear leotard pants, elf pants?
I do not. No one wants to see me in tights.
So
I wear the pants that you kind of talk about, or I wear shorts occasionally. I do wear pants the majority of the time just because of poison ivy around here.
That's why I don't wear shorts, because I don't want my legs to get all cut up, and I don't want the poison ivy effect.
I once saw a guy wet wading in January in jorts
What are
in
jorts?
our local
Wow.
creeks.
What does that mean?
Yep. Jean
Wow.
shorts.
Jean shorts.
Shout out to the jorts.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Back to
Wow.
the jeans.
In
Bring him on the
January.
podcast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey now.
I've seen something similar
Okay.
before.
Now let's move on. No, Josh, you asked what I was doing wrong. And first of all, I was wearing jeans. And second, I used to wear my same wading boots, and I would put a couple pair of big, thick wool socks in there so that I could take up the space, And then finally, I spent $20 back then on a pair of neoprene wading socks. Everybody sells them now.
yeah.
When I did that, all of a sudden I could wear my regular wading boots, which is what I want to do. I don't want to wear sandals because rocks get in. Sandals are not a good solution
Yeah.
for most times.
No.
And I don't want to change my wading boots. I know they got flats boots and real light boots for wet wading. Great. If you like those, cool. But I want my regular traction because I'm kind of nuts about traction. I want to know that I have that foot support. I don't want anything to change. So I wear the neoprene wading socks, and I actually still wear thin pair of wool socks inside the neoprene socks. So anyway, my feet feel very natural, what I'm used to. And when I started doing that is when I started feeling very comfortable with wet wading, and it really did change things for me.
We were on a trip in Montana, and it was like 94 to 100 degrees, I felt like every day. And we had brought waders with us, and we went and bought, like you were talking about, the neoprene wading socks, and it was just an absolute game changer to wear those and fish, and just so much more
And they're like
comfortable.
$30 now. I mean, we spend a lot more money on other stuff.
Yeah, this is why I don't include heat as one of my main detractors in terms of conditions, because I feel like if you're assuming that you're fishing safe water for the trout, you have cold water, and if you apply the right clothing to it, your time in the water is not that uncomfortable. And I think, a lot of even the fishing clothing that's sold today has some sun protection built into it. And then, all you have to do is lather up the back of your neck. I think it's the walk in and out that bothers me the most in the heat, because we hike a lot around here to get into fishing spots, and that's certainly uncomfortable, but I don't know if I would include that in a condition that deters me from ability to fish well.
It's my least comfortable.
Yeah.
I guess I would say, because you can't take, at some point you can't take off any more clothes to cool off. If it's cold, you can always put more stuff on.
Let's talk about the cold then,
In my mind, cold is, especially extreme cold, is the one that takes the most work on your end to be prepared
Nice way
for
to put it.
You have to have the right clothing. You have to have your system down to stay warm. You have to have a way of keeping your hands able to tie knots. I mean, there's so much that goes into keeping comfortable, especially if you know that you're going to sweat getting in.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
like we said, we
Yeah.
walk in a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hunting, right? The way you guys have to walk in a lot of times, and
Yeah. And it seems easier to do hunting than fishing because you're in the water, and so you're not like in hunting. Often I strap my coat to my backpack, or, I have stuffed in my backpack like my top 3 layers, but in fishing, I'm rarely carrying a pack big enough to hold those types of layers easily or comfortably. And then, I feel like that's a little bit less intuitive.
I feel like with fishing too, there are periods of, kind of high activity going to the next spot, or maybe just wading some heavy water. And then especially in the winter, there are long periods for me of low activity where I'll fish longer, deeper, flat, or even a pool. And I'm either nymphing it or rolling streamers through it pretty slow. And I will be in that water for sometimes an hour. And then I go, whew, I'm getting cold.
Oh, yeah.
So you're trying to satisfy things at all ends.
Yeah.
So do you guys think that the solution to dynamic fishing like that, where you're going to be sweating some and then standing still for a long period of time, is wool? Like we can all agree it's not cotton. Like you don't want cotton as your base layer.
Yeah.
Cotton is rotten.
Cotton is rotten.
Cotton is rotten.
For me, it's all about, being able to unzip things and take hats off and take gloves off and on and off, and especially unzipping. That can usually regulate body heat that way.
I think Josh and I talk a lot about this just because we do hunt, and in the hunting realm and industry, I think there's been thought put into fabrics for longer historically when it comes to their functionality. And I'm a huge wool fan because of its breathability and because of its persistence of insulation even when wet. And so on the water, that's a huge, that's honestly, not exaggerating, that can be a life-saving deal at times. When you have base layers that are wool, even if wet, those things will continue to insulate your body and provide warmth. So,
and a lot of the times those things are now moisture wicking as well. Exactly. So they'll take that moisture from your spine that's dripping down and push it out to external
They're
layers.
Also comfortable now. I mean, when I was a kid, wool was itchy against your skin, and now it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of the advancements in like the Primaloft stuff that is super warm and super light. I know Orvis and Sims both have like good jackets that have that lining in it. And I can fish like a long sleeves t-shirt in one of those not so bulky jackets down to like almost like 30 degrees, 25 degrees, and still be warm. And I don't feel like I'm weighted down where, like, I remember as a kid, like I had, a sweater, a t-shirt, and a big jacket on. And I, like you're saying, the cotton is rotten, walking around and, walking 100 yards and then just sweating and being soaked, and then 10 minutes later being frozen. And so it's also, it takes more thought as far as understanding what the materials do and how they provide you warmth.
Would you guys acknowledge that the hands are the biggest challenge from a fishing standpoint in those ultra cold conditions?
Yeah, I'll mention, I wrote I'm still writing a full series about fishing in the winter. And there are a lot of tactics articles there, but the whole thing starts with how to stay warm. And that took 2 articles to cover it. First it was hands and toes, and that was it. Then it was everything else. It really is. It's fingers, toes are first.
When I was at Penn State, I led backpacking trips for a couple years. Yeah. And we used to teach the students, one, how to dress for the day, but also how to pack ahead of time, ready for the trip. We used an acronym, WISE, W-I-S-E, and the W stood for wicking, and that was your base layer.
Yeah.
And then the I stood for insulation, so you'd insulate yourself over your base layer.
Yeah.
The S stood for streamline, which meant basically your containment for those insulating and wicking layers. And then your E was your extremities, your hands, your toes, your head and your hat. And that's something I still think about today. Like the night before I go out fishing on a really cold morning, I lay it all out on the ground like a little person. I lay down my tights, I'll lay down my socks, I'll lay down my first wicking layer, my second wicking layer, then all my insulative layers, and then I'll tie it all together with a coat and a rain jacket over the top that blocks the wind, keeps me streamlined, and then I pile on those hats and gloves.
So that's a good point. Do you guys all have, I guess I would call it like a go bag, or do you have like a duffel bag or a book bag that you keep in your car or keep ready when you go fishing so that, hey, I'm going fishing tonight after work, let me just grab the bag and go? Or do you just kind of wing it?
I'm not much of a wing it guy for anything when it comes to fishing, right? And Joey's been fishing with me a lot, again, my oldest son. And I was just yesterday encouraging him, hey, Joe, especially now that it's getting colder, you need to have a bag like you're talking about, Bill. And he sees, everybody in my family knows that there's my gray duffel bag. It's heavy because it has all kinds of, you guys have seen it. Even in the summertime, I just kind of keep everything in there. And it has every clothing option that I'm going to need. It has hand warmers. I have flashlights and things like that. And then I also have a box with a whole bunch of fishing gear in it that I bring all the time. But yeah, that bag for me is key because, again, none of us get the kind of time on the water that we really want. So in the winter, it takes effort to get out there. And if part of that effort is looking for what clothes you want to wear, then it becomes too much effort. I keep everything in a bag.
I like having the stuff in the car all the time. So, hey, if I happen to fall in, I have
Right.
something to run back to the car
Right.
and change, especially in the cold. It makes a big
It's
difference.
not just about what you have on. It's about you have to be prepared for you might fall in. And, if you fall in the summer, who cares?
man.
But yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I've done that in the winter, and then I didn't have that kind of setup, and I was a long way from my car, so I lit a fire,
There
and I
you
started
go.
drying out
Yeah.
my clothes, and so I was sitting there shirtless in the snow by a fire.
Roll around in the snow.
Yeah, drying out my clothes because I went head underwater.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I just ran back to the, I pretty much jogged back to the car. I was about a half mile back.
This was in the first 30 minutes of fishing, and I had one day of fishing.
So Dr. Science, what's the best way to do here? Do you run back to the car or do you build a fire?
Let's talk about physiologic effects of temperature for just a second.
Appropriation?
Because, yeah, no.
Did I say that? I probably said that wrong.
You did. So our body is intelligently designed, right? So as we cool and as we get cold, our peripheries or our extremities begin to go through a process of vasoconstriction. That means the blood vessels constrict and get more narrow. That's to divert the blood flow towards our core, which is the only part of our body remaining warm, right? So that worsens the problem that we're experiencing when fishing of having cold hands. As you begin to cool and stand in one place, you get exponentially colder in your extremities because your body is shunting that blood back to the heart and circulating it through a more narrow part of your body. So there is an element to which you cannot warm up your extremities unless you warm up your core temperature. And so the ultimate, and you all probably have known this and experienced this when you're on the water, you will do your best. You have your hands and hand warmers in your pockets. You're trying to warm your hands up. They're still cold, that nothing's really working. And then you walk a half mile or a mile to the next spot you're going to fish, and you're toasty and your hands don't have gloves. And you're just like, this is amazing. My hands feel great. So there's an extent to which you have to move and you have to generate some core temperature in order to fuel the warmth to the extremities. There are some, and that's what this is touches on a dangerous point of hypothermia, where, Josh, I'm glad you didn't experience this, but as you cool to an extent and you experience exposure to an extent, the nerves on the surface of your extremities and of your skin actually begin to burn and feel warm or kind of hot. And so there's a phenomenon where people, as they cool to a particular point, feel hot and they will begin to strip clothing off.
Don't do that.
And then further, don't do that. So exposure can be really dangerous, obviously, in that sense. But some of the tricks to use in your favor, if you're trying to warm up your extremities, and Dom, you do this, is using hand warmers strategically, kind of, and so if you kind of use a loose rubber band, I would kind of foot stomp loose because you don't want to restrict blood flow at all. But if you use a hand warmer at your wrist versus kind of in the palm of the hand or putting it in your pockets, you're actually tricking the body a little bit into vasodilating the blood vessels in your hands and sending more blood into your hands rather than less. And it actually will keep the hands warmer for longer. And so targeted use of hand warmers like that can be really useful and helpful. Same thing goes with the foot to an extent, but the foot's a little tricky because getting access to the central blood flow to the foot's a little bit less intuitive. You could put a hand warmer in the back of your knee, the popliteal fossa.
Interesting. That's cool.
Which is behind the knee. And so that's an area you could potentially target. But I haven't tried it. I mean, maybe we should all try it this winter.
I have horrible problems with my feet. I can fish 15, 20 degrees without any gloves on. But at 30 degrees, my hands or my feet start to have problems. And so
give it a try this winter.
In the winter, that's why a lot of times I'll fish faster.
Well, moving.
Because I need to keep moving because my feet just start to have circulation problems or something's going on.
My
down
solution
there.
for the winter did it for me. I wear a size 10 boot regularly, and now I have a size 11 boot. I can literally get 3 thick pair of wool socks, of course, in my stocking foot waders. And then, I can fit all that, and they're not jammed. The toes aren't tight. Do you ever try getting bigger boots?
So I've tried bigger boots with double wool socks and foot warmers, and I still have problems. My resolution to it is just catch them faster and move faster.
What you were saying, Trevor, about the hand warmers it's been a good trick for a lot of people when I show them this, and I wrote an article about it. Yeah, I wear fingerless wool gloves. I think a lot of us wear similar, if not the same. I use Fox River fingerless wool gloves. They're cheap. You can wash them. They're, of course, warm still when wet. But I want I have to have my fingers out. I do so much re-rigging and changing because that's how I enjoy fishing, that, having my fingers out is just a priority. And I've been able to do it even down into single digits, especially though by putting like you said, Trevor, the hand warmer, I'll put it on the inside of my wrist and under the cuff of that wool glove. Now, I know that on the package it says don't put this next to your skin. Fair enough. But I do. I put it right next to my skin, and then the wool glove is over top of it. And yeah, sometimes I'll even snug that up with sometimes a rubber band, but really a wristband. I use wristbands a lot in the winter. And that kind of just pushes everything in there, kind of tightens it up. I can literally feel the warmth go into my hand, but especially then up my arm. And I'll kind of push it in when I get cold. Of course, I use...
And you're talking like a sweatband.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, to say sweatband or wristband, yeah.
Which is great because I think I mentioned earlier, I think the detriment to using some sort of device like that would be just a restriction in blood flow that kind of counteracts some of the benefits that you're getting out of the whole system to begin with, right?
So in addition to the wrist, I like to put one in my breast pocket too.
Oh, yeah.
Like right over my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it warms up my
that
core
works.
a lot and sends that warm blood to all those extremities and really heats that central nervous system up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like annoyingly warm, isn't it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love it in the tree stand too.
I bet.
And when you're hunting,
Yeah.
you can just feel it pushing against I put it against the skin too sometimes. Man, that feels
You guys
so
ever
good.
do one on the back of your neck?
Oh, that'd
No.
be good, right?
Mm-mm.
How do you
Man,
hold that in place, Josh?
I mean, I just have it like
Duct
usually.
tape.
There you go.
Well, no. Usually there's enough layers of clothing there. I just set it there.
It'll stay in place.
It'll stay. It'll stay, but because my collar is too tight for it to go down inside, it just sits there.
My dad has talked for years. We go to the Steelers games and we sit there and it's cold, especially when they get into playoffs. Anyway, my dad has talked for years about having a base layer with pockets sewn in where you could put those hand warmers. And now what he does do quite a bit is take one of those big hand warmers. They're not they call them body warmers. That's what they market them as, body warmers. Mm-hmm. He puts it on his lower back, under his shirts, right outside of his base layer at his lower back. And he loves that. You could sew pockets into a shirt and just have them like at the top, the base of your neck. That's pretty good. I never thought of that one. Your shoulder blades, maybe.
Not a bad idea.
So
Yeah.
My dad did that. He showed that to me, and
That's
it
neat.
really works. So another thing about the cold, especially extreme cold, is the ice and how difficult it can be once your guides start to freeze up dealing with that. What do you guys do to fix that? You can even get like a straw around your mono sometimes.
So
You ever see that?
Yeah, so really, another advantage to fishing the mono rig is that it doesn't ice up nearly as much as a fly line. It's a hard line that sort of kicks out the ice as it goes through the guides. It's also not as thick as the fly line, so it doesn't carry as much water. It ends up to be ice. That's a big deal for me. The other thing for me is Stanley's Ice Off Paste. I know, I've tried it all.
You have to reapply.
You do.
Yeah.
It lasts for about 20, 30 minutes. That's when it gets real bad. And I've tried that on the guides usually.
One way I counteract this problem is just by fishing a consistent distance away from me. So
Right.
rather than just pulling line in and out,
Yeah.
I'll just fish, 15 feet or 20 feet.
That's the key. You do the 10 cara thing, right? I mean, you're
right.
fixed
Yeah.
length of line, so you're not creating
Yep.
ice in the guides. Right on.
you're moving your arm instead of stripping the line. You're
Exactly.
you're basically preventing the line from going through the guides.
Yeah. Hey, you guys think snow is a problem?
Biggest thing for snow for me is the walk in. When you're trudging through tracks that haven't been walked through yet, and it's 2.5 feet of snow, I sweat to death trying to get to the creek.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the worst thing about it to me.
But if you do walk through it, that water is all yours, right? Nobody
Yeah,
else is
right
going to
on.
do it. That's true. And I always love the snow because you can see who's in there or who hasn't been in there for a week.
Yes.
I got a huge snowstorm a week ago and still there's no tracks. I'll go get it,
Visibility can be a little tricky sometimes depending on the
Yeah.
heaviness of the snow. I know we've fished them all days all together here it's just tough to see
Yeah.
10 feet in front of you,
I don't think there's anything here.
There's a limitation to
Yeah,
that.
nobody can do anything about that.
Right.
There's something that the wet snow and it just covering everything with like a nice new blanket is probably my most favorite inclement weather to fish, or just probably my most favorite time to fish is just that, fresh new blanket of snow.
Yeah.
It's stuck to the trees. Just everything looks nice.
It's dead quiet.
Yes. It has that dampening of the woods.
Yes.
And
I'm with you. Some of my best memories are being out there with my dog.
Mm-hmm.
And just there's, again, you know that there's nobody else out there. It's like a record of who has been there and what to expect. Oh, I love it.
So speaking of like, snow, what do you guys think about rain? Do you guys like the rain, hate the rain?
I think the hardest condition to fish might be 34 degrees or 33 degrees and rain. I'd much rather it be 25 degrees and snow. I can deal with that better. I do feel like this rain, fishing in the rain often is just willpower. Now, I'm not talking about drizzle. We're talking about rain. Now it's raining.
My first thing is always I want to get dressed and be dry to start the day.
Yes.
Like I don't want to get dressed as it rains on me and like my underlayers are wet. If I know that there's not a good place to change and if it's blowing and it's rainy, I'll stop at a gas station and I'll get dressed under a big canopy and ensure that I get dressed and I'm dry, and then I'll continue the drive to the river.
Yeah, you got to start dry and you have to be careful to stay dry.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny. We all buy these great raincoats. Sometimes we spend a bunch of money on them, but so few people really use those raincoats, and we see it. Most people go home when the rain really starts. Good raincoats, even just a hiking raincoat. I used a Gander Mountain green, ugly hiking raincoat for I'm going to say 8 or 10 years, and even that had a way, to adjust the hood and really keep the rain out and deal with things. It had cuffs that I could really cinch down. So I'm going to make sure I start dry and try to stay dry. So I'll adjust that hood to keep the rain out. This one might be a little strange, but I'm back to those wristbands or those sweatbands. I'll wear those under my cuff and up on my forearm because no matter how great the raincoat is, when you're casting, there's always some water that starts to leak up to your forearm. Yeah, and it'll get all the way to your elbow and then even beyond. So when I know it's going to be really rainy, I take these wristbands with me, and again, I put them on my forearm, so they will catch a lot of that water. It's just kind of trickling in. And then even if it's a long day, I'll change that if it gets waterlogged, and I'll just throw it in the back of my vest. And now I have a dry one. And I should mention, too,
that's a good
rainy,
idea. Yeah.
it works. On rainy days, I have dry things in food storage bags, whatever, gallon Ziploc bags in the back of my vest. It's a way to stay out there,
Something else you need to consider when selecting a raincoat is ventilation. When we're wearing a raincoat, it doesn't necessarily mean it's cold out. It could be springtime, 70 degrees, but it's pounding rain. Oftentimes now, raincoats are made with like armpit zippers underneath that you can open up and then let a lot of the steam and a lot of the trapped heat inside your body escape, and that's another game changer.
Definitely. And another thing to add to that would be just making sure you have that wicking base layer on under the raincoat. It's amazing how much difference that makes because while a lot of our raincoats are Gore-Tex, if you don't have a wicking layer underneath that, you can really build up some condensation and sweat underneath that.
Yeah, some of the most uncomfortable days are when it's, 65 or 70, and then it's raining, and you think, all right, I'm going to wear the raincoat. Well, that's when it's key to have that ventilation, like you're saying, and the wicking layers. For me, the cutoff is if it's 75 or let's say 80 degrees, I'm not going to wear a raincoat. I'm just going to accept that I'm going to get wet. And I'll fish anyway.
Mine's like 65.
Oh, wow,
I'm a fat kid. I'll stay warm. I'll wear but I do wear some sort of hood, just like a moisture wicking shirt with a hood, but just a little bit of a hood to keep the rain from getting on my sunglasses or on my hat. I can fish in, let's say 65, 70 degrees and it can rain and I'll get a little bit wet, but until I'm completely soaked, most days I'm fine. But for me, if I wear a rain jacket at that temperature, I sweat more because I'm moving around and I end up more wet from the rain jacket than I do from the rain.
You guys wear the rain jacket over top of your packs or underneath your packs? Like a vest or a chest pack or
underneath for me.
Under.
I don't mind if my vest gets wet.
I mean, I hate having to take everything out and dry everything that was in the vest when I get home. But I have to have access to all my stuff.
I wish there was an easier way to
do
do that.
I wish, but I don't know what it is.
Right.
So I have two different systems.
Okay.
If I'm fishing and it's not going to rain, I'll often wear a vest because it is more accessible to get to stuff. If I know it's going to rain, I will then, for the most part, use a waterproof pack to put my stuff in so that all my stuff isn't soaked at the end of the day, meaning my fly boxes, everything just isn't drenched. Or maybe it rains in the morning, so I use that pack in the morning and then I'll rotate and move it into the vest in the afternoon.
Yeah. Most important thing is to keep your rain jacket over top of your waders, though. I can't tell you how many anglers I see have their rain jacket tucked inside their waders, making a funnel.
I've seen that a couple times.
What are we doing out there?
No, that's not how this goes. All right, so we have one more element that we fight that we really want to talk about. I think the sun. The sun for me it's my least favorite. I hate the sun. I think brown trout really especially hate the sun. And I think it's the most underrated element out there. It changes everything. I kind of see it every day we're out there. If you can keep the sun behind the trout, that really helps. Sometimes when the sun goes behind the clouds, bang, the action turns on. We see it a lot. There are ways you can deal with it, ways to adjust. You can look for angles, sections of river that don't have as much sun. Early season and late season can be tough.
With a lot of our rivers, you can find shade. But yeah, it's more work for sure.
Yeah, they go around bends.
What really sucks is when you have a sunny day and it's freezing cold or something like that.
Well, yeah, I think, so early and late season when you don't have leaves on the trees and now all of a sudden the sun is high enough in the sky, let's say like March or even right now, like mid-November, the sun is still high enough in the sky, midday, where, boy, it's right on the water and there are no leaves. There is no shade. And yeah, if you can't get around a bend and keep it out of the trout's eyes, you got to think about it. When you're driving, east in the morning, you don't like looking right into the sun. And the trout don't like looking upstream or facing upstream and looking right into the sun. It's tough for them.
I do think the winter is the time I hate it the most, for sure. Any other time of year, I don't see it as as big of a factor because I feel like it's one of the easier ones to get around. As you mentioned, like whether it's the section of the stream or is it whether you're just going to fish one bank because of the sun, and it almost makes that particular area better fishing, right? Because if you find the shade when it's sunny, you oftentimes can find feeding fish. But in the wintertime, I do agree that is super tough because you're also often combining that with like lower clear water and then bright overhead sun or bright sun, and that's a tough combination. I agree.
I think what I deal with the most, and I've been talking about this every day with clients, you get that glare on the water. I call it black water. You get those highlights that polarized lenses really they can't defeat it. That's for sure. They can help a little bit, but we're talking about those angles that you just can't see into. I will position myself then just so I can see if the sun angle, and the sun could be behind the clouds, and it still creates this black water effect a lot of times. There are certain angles you can see into the water, and there's certain angles you can't, and you're looking right into the highlights or this black water effect. It often is limiting. Today, for example, the sun was kind of to our left, and it was in and out of the clouds. But all day, if we looked left, we could not see. I don't care how good the glasses are. It just doesn't matter. You could not see into the water. You can see the surface, but it's all highlights, and you're looking right into highlights. So then you can't really read the water very well and necessarily fish it very well. So we kept waiting over. I'd say, let's reset to the left. So we'd go over to the left bank, and then we'd fish to the right. And when you're looking into the right, heck, you could see the river bottom, 1, 2, 3 feet of water. You could see it all day long. Even as that sun got a little higher in the sky, you could still see to the right, but you could not see to the left. So it's limiting. We could still fish that water, but it kind of forced us to move around a lot more.
Speaking about moving around, a lot of times if I know it's going to be a sunny day, I may hit a big river for the first few hours of the day when the sun comes up and really starts beating down on the river. Maybe I'll bail on the big river and go fish some tributaries because the smaller streams often have more canopy. Even though might not be as many leaves and stuff in the winter, you have that more canopy. You have the more like a bendier, and you might have some less pressured fish that are, middle of the day. They may feed and that stream's going to fish a little better, and then maybe hit that for a little bit and then go back to the main river once the sun goes over the other side of the mountain.
Yeah, right on. And so it affects us. It affects the angles that we can see in, and it affects even just our comfort level for being able to, fish right into the sun. That's difficult. But yeah, it affects the fishing too. I think all of these elements that we've talked about, we acknowledge they also affect the fishing, the fish themselves. If the water is too warm, then it affects the fish. If the water is too cold, then it affects the fish. What we've mostly talked about here is, how how it affects us and how we can deal with these elements or fight against them. All right, good stuff. Thanks, guys, for another great discussion. So pushing through those tough times, dealing with difficult conditions, puts you one step ahead of most anglers. I mean, you all see it. The rivers and the parking lots are empty when the wind is howling, the snow is blowing, or it's pouring rain. Sure, we'd all like to fish the sweetheart days, but the more you learn to fight the elements and win, to have success on the water, the more you long for those tough conditions. Truthfully, give me rain over sun. Yes, seriously. I'll take January over July. And I'm just as happy to fish in a snow squall as I am to fish 70 degrees in May. That's the truth. And it's not just about meeting the challenges. It's not just about having fewer anglers on the water. It's a certain satisfaction of being a complete angler, knowing that you're ready for anything. Because you know you can catch trout in the rain, in the snow, in the cold, or in direct, hard sun. Knowing that you have a system and a method of approach. Then instead of shying away from tough conditions, you welcome every new day, no matter the weather, as a chance to go fishing. So thanks to everyone out there for listening and for supporting this Troutbitten podcast. Austin, will you read us out?
So remember, Troutbitten.com is a free resource for all anglers. So dig in and check it out. Navigate through the menus and find what you like. Share it, leave a comment. Use a search page if you're looking for something specific. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags too. Thank you for listening. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment, because that really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.